It absolutely looks like there is going to be some pushback for the US Cellular deal with T-Mobile. And, this actually reaches across different companies too. I'll cover all that here in this video. So let's quickly get to kind of like what's new, right? Last week, maybe a couple of weeks ago, pictured on the screen, articles like this were getting published. How T-Mobile and US Cellular were asking the FCC to hurry up and kind of finish the regulatory process to this deal. The problem is there's a lot of time between the approvals of these types of deals for comments and questions and concerns to be raised as part of the approval process. Like, you could be US Cellular and T-Mobile and request an expedited review. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. Anybody who wants to objectively oppose this because of concerns and antitrust and those kind of things and monopolistic tendencies, they're valid, right? So a review process is in order, and it's just part of the due process. So that's what's happening. And there are entities, companies, industry groups like the Rural Wireless Association, Communications Workers of America, Public Knowledge. There's all these different groups who want to view this with a microscope and look at the potential harm it brings to the industry, consumer groups, and other companies. So consumer advocacy groups specifically are really pushing back here, as well as other companies, like Comcast is one of them. There's some other entities, but really you're not going to see any opposition from Verizon or AT&T because they've got spectrum deals wrapped up in this that are contingent upon the T-Mobile component being approved. So they, from what I understand, based on the objection, the consumer advocacy groups want the FCC to treat all of the separate transactions. So that would be the T-Mobile piece with all that comes with it, and that would also be the Verizon and AT&T deals with US Cellular. They want it all viewed as one. They don't want it viewed separately. The advantage of it all being viewed separately is that they would be strengthening multiple companies, right? Their assets from US Cellular would be distributed and it would have more balance. But the advocacy groups are saying it should all be viewed as one large transaction because that's kind of what's happening. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't need to sugarcoat anything. While the spectrum leaving US Cellular and going to all these different companies is better for those networks, it doesn't necessarily not make sense for it to be viewed as one transaction, because it is, right? They're just going to take assets and distribute them to an industry, right? A single industry. But there's no other version of this that's more fair. So there is really no other option. So what it boils down to is, should US Cellular be able to liquidate their assets this way? Or are you saying that they need to go down in a ball of fire, in a dumpster fire? Like, what are the other options? So unfortunately, I think what the FCC is going to see is these are a distribution of assets that's going to go to lots of different companies that'll help them and customers. The unfortunate thing is that US Cellular is giving up. So a version where you just block to block doesn't really help the situation. I think, in fact, it just delays the inevitable that eventually US Cellular goes under, sells out, does something else in just different time frame. Unfortunately, right? There's just no place for a carrier that's kind of in between small and medium. That's kind of how I look at US Cellular. They're not a large provider. They're not national, right? They've consolidated their network reach at multiple times over the last couple of decades. So I'm just not really sure where else they're going to go. So whatever concessions these groups would have, I don't know what they would be. I think they're just pushing back to push back. And look, nobody wants a consolidating market. I just don't see a path in some alternate direction that works better or is just a better option. I don't see it. Maybe you guys can think of one or two, or let me know what you have for ideas. I just don't understand how you could structure this for it to be better. To just block to block is not the way to move. But if you could develop an outcome that results in advantages for consumers, then that is something you present. And unfortunately, I think when it comes to regulations and things like this, I don't think the best option is just block. I think the best option is structure it so that way it is advantageous for consumers. And then, for the sake of the companies, if the companies can do something in the favor of the consumers, well, then we can win in some way, shape, or form. And I'm definitely not a company apologist. That day will never come. I'll always be on the side of the consumer. That's who I am, and that's what I stand on. I just know that US Cellular ain't it. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. Maybe there's some things that could be fought for that the MNOs like Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T could concede to that could help consumers short-term, mid-term, long-term kind of deal. Anyways, tell me what you guys think about all this. Drop me some comments. Like, share, subscribe. Check out some more videos. We'll see you guys on the next one.